All right, so today we're going to spiritually analyze JD Vance's soul, the Vice President of the United States and Trump's partner, friend, pal in the Oval Office, or White House, actually. To do that today, we're going to look at his psychology, the mind of JD Vance a lot, then the astrology, which is going to show us the karmic patterns and also spiritual evolution he's meant to undertake in this incarnation, and then alchemy, which is this transformational process that will help him spiritually evolve into his full potential, okay? So for the psychology, JD Vance is a perfectionist. You can tell he very much lives in his head. Before he was on the Trump train, he was very much against Trump, criticizing him, was a never Trumper, and oh, how the tables have turned. But regardless, the way that he presents himself, you can tell he's very conscientious, but also very self-conscious on the way he's being portrayed. And something that is very common with perfectionists is that they desire to please whoever they see as above them or important to them. And you can tell that he makes sure to choose his words very carefully. In an administration where there's a lot of contradiction, JD Vance is usually pretty aligned and consistent in his messaging because he's very thoughtful in how he portrays himself and how he speaks and communicates. And that's because he has a really good Mercury, but we'll get into that later. Fear-driven, because of this perfectionist nature, but also you can just kind of tell how he gets, steamrolled by Trump and just kind of follows along. He's driven by fear. There is a sense that he is fighting off his back foot. You can kind of just tell when he's in interviews or when he's kind of standing behind the president, where Trump just kind of says what he says and he just lets it fall out, lets it all hang out. JD Vance is a lot more, like I said before, conscientious and self-conscious. He's very particular in the way that he's presenting himself and the way that he's being perceived by others. It's definitely of like an energy like, am I doing a good job? And that's to everybody. And then heart-centered. Now, unfortunately, because he's so fear-driven and because he's a perfectionist and also, I think, to a certain extent, codependent with Trump, he suppresses this heart-centeredness. But I have a feeling, from my observations and just my general intuition, the vibes I'm reading off of him, I can sense that he has a heart. I know, it's surprising, but more so he's heart-centered. I think he has a lot of feelings. I think he feels things deeply, and I think he actually has a good heart. It's just so covered in fear and past trauma that he suppresses it. And that allows him to be complacent, but also enabling somebody like Trump who can do things that are not the most kosher, to keep it mild, right? But also depends on who you are. You might love Trump, so fair enough. Not my perspective, but you get the point. I think he has a relatively good heart, and I think he tries to lead with his heart, but he gets steamrolled by people that are more powerful than him. For example, Trump. So now we're looking at the chart, the astrology, to see that spiritual evolution and see, karmically, what's going on with JD Vance. So we don't know that, we do know the time he was born. I love when we have the time. So great. So we know everything about him and his spiritual chart. Funny enough, I don't know if it's a coincidence, but he has the same South Node, North Node, Ketu Rahu axis as Trump. Only difference is that Trump has a sun right here, has his sun here. He's a Gemini. But Ketu Sagittarius in the 5th house, Rahu, Gemini, 11th house. JD Vance and Trump have the same path. So that means they have the exact same spiritual evolutionary path. Don't think that's a coincidence. Some would say fate. So what does that mean? Well, I said it in the Trump video, which you can also see on my page, but when you have Ketu, South Node, and Sagittarius 5th house, wherever we have the South Node, we are very karmically comfortable. We have a lot of experience in past lives working with that energy, working with those patterns. So if it's in Sagittarius, that means he has an inherent understanding, but also over-reliance on long-term visions and walking his path with consistency. So he's very consistent, he's very stable in his identity and the way that he expresses himself. JD Vance has been very similar to JD Vance 10 years ago and probably even before then. He's probably somebody who puts one step or one foot in front of the other and just is consistently moving towards his long-term visions, long-term goals. What he needs to do in this incarnation as Rahu, Gemini, in the 11th house person is that he needs to develop the more short-term skills. The short-term skills, the tools, the people in his life that will get him towards that long-term goal. And also at the 11th house represents merits, rewards, titles, society, social groups, social networks. Well, as you can see, he's done a pretty good job. He's vice president of the United States. He's intelligent, he's conscientious, he's, I'm about to say thoughtful. I will say thoughtful, but it gets repressed, like I said, because of the company he keeps. And also because he has a good Mercury. Mercury is the Lord of Gemini. It's exalted. It depends on what part of Gemini or what part of Virgo, but it's exalted for him. So because the Lord of Rahu, Mercury, is exalted, he's done a good job of developing those skills, done a good job of figuring things out, finding the right tools, finding the right people to move him up the ladder to get to that high position of the 11th house where he's at right now. But the key problem is that he was so focused on his long-term vision, most likely to be president of the United States or to be of a high position in politics, that it became distorted and he went back on his values. Because again, beforehand, he was a never Trumper. He was like, I ain't messing with this fake tan dude with whatever kind of hairpiece he has. And now he's really out here saying whatever Trump wants him to say. So he's got a Mars-Saturn conjunction in Scorpio, which is the most painful sign, Scorpio. Believe me, as a Scorpio, I can tell you from experience. Saturn, Mars. Saturn stars Mars. Mars stars Saturn. They do not like each other. They hate each other. And they're in Mars' sign of Scorpio, which is already a painful sign. Scorpio represents our inner demons, our trauma, our deepest fears and insecurities. Saturn represents our trauma, fears, insecurities, deepest fears. And then Mars is our will, our anger, our aggression, and ability to move forward with effort and volition. So this is probably why he's fear-driven and a perfectionist, very agreeable and codependent with Trump. He's getting steamrolled. Trump has his Mars in Leo, which is very powerful for Mars. Mars likes the fire sign Leo of the sun. And it's powerful here in Scorpio as well, but that Saturn, something happened when he was younger, most likely when he was a toddler, when you start to develop your will, when you first develop your will when you're like 1 to 3, probably had some trauma or some fear that told him that if he exerts himself, if he exerts his will, if he puts forth effort to influence his environment and other people, there will be severe consequences. And it's also in the 4th house, Mars, which means it's a very weak Mars. Mars is the most strong in the 10th and most weak in the 4th. So when you have Mars in the fourth house, even though it's in Scorpio, that means it's going to be a lot of repressed anger. So he's got a lot of repressed fear and anger surrounding the fact that he's not exerting himself and being as confident and a warrior like he should. And this is why this path, despite the success of getting to this Gemini in 11th house and embodying it a lot at a young age, because I think he's less than 40 or around 40, which is really good to develop your Rahu area of the chart that young, because that Mercury is so good. But there's a twisted energy to it because of that Saturn-Mars conjunction in Scorpio, which again is such a painful sign. So what does he need to do to move along that path in a more healthy, sustainable way? Transform inner critic. That inner critic is trying to keep him safe, and so it's criticizing him whenever he steps out of line or exerts himself too much. 100%, that's just how it works with perfectionists. And somebody like him, who I know is very conscientious, very thoughtful in the way that he does things, but also strategic. He needs to turn that inner critic into an inner guide, somebody who can give him advice, but in a healthy way and be aligned with who he truly is, not out of fear, not being a fear-based inner critic, but an inspiring and purposeful inner guide. Develop boundaries. So this is a way that he can develop his will. If he wants a more tangible, practical way to develop boundaries, lifting weights or physical exercise, exerting himself, getting into his body, being a physically aggressive human being in certain aspects is important, especially as a man. So working out would be amazing for him. Learning how to stand up for himself and be more dominant would be amazing, less agreeable, less codependent, less of a pushover and a doormat. Heal childhood trauma. So again, this all kind of stems from something happening when he was around a toddler, because that's when Mars is being developed, like I said, 1 to 3. So during that period, you have Saturn there, and it's causing a lot of pain. Also, like I said, in the 4th house of our emotions, of our home. So something happened at home, or maybe with the mother, or his emotions, where anytime he was angry or exerted himself, he was in pain. There was some painful consequence. So whatever that trauma is, he needs to heal that, go inside of himself, connect with his inner child, learn what it needs, listen to it, hold space, and then take practical steps in the external world to heal his inner child. And if you want to heal your inner child, I have a step-by-step process and guide. It's in the transformation guide down below. You can get the link in the description, where you work with your inner child to heal that trauma, to, lighten it. Lighten the frequency of your inner child so it can be more open and you're not driven by fear, like JD Vance, but more joy and happiness and fulfillment. And last point too, he also has Jupiter debilitated in Capricorn in the 6th house. When you have Jupiter debilitated in Capricorn, the person is very identified with the idea that everything I do is my responsibility. Because Jupiter is a spiritual, transcendent, abundant planet. And when you have it in a restrictive sign like Capricorn, it's all about duty and the material, the person is really heavy and hard on themselves. So JD Vance is really, really hard on himself. He restricts his joy, he restricts his happiness. So inner child, man, he really needs to do some work on that inner child, and he will excel and be so much happier as a human being. Thank you for your time. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Cheers.